A very pleasant good day to all of our viewers and friends, those listening via Second Advent Radio. Welcome to another Marriage Encounter. With me, Dr. Greene, is Dr. Braithwaite, and we are continuing our discussion. Specifically, we are talking about taking your marriage for granted. And this is a very important subject. Dr. Braithwaite, I think this is something that all married couples need to hear about.
Absolutely. And we've been having some very meaningful discussions as we consider this area of how possible it is sometimes for spouses to take their marriage for granted. We really want to engage a discussion and to remind you that engaging each other is so important so that persons don't feel as though the whole experience of marriage is being taken for granted.
Well, let's begin with a word of prayer. Almighty Father and our God, be with us as we share on this very important subject. We pray that you will be with all of our listeners, whether they're joining via the World Wide Web or they're listening live via Second Advent Radio. We pray, O God, that the information presented today will prove meaningful in Jesus' name.
Amen.
Amen. Doc, I want to begin with a quotation from Cloud and Townsend. And I'm just going to say it as it is here. The reality is that marriage is only as good as the investment people make in it. Marriage is only as good as the investment people make in it. We're talking about taking marriages for granted.
Right.
And there comes a time in the life of the married couple when, if they're not careful, things begin to drift. And they may get to the point where they don't take time to do assessment, to do evaluation, to attend to the needs of the marriage. I'm not talking about the individual needs of the man or the woman,
right,
but the needs of the marriage. And we're talking about marriage here as an organism,
right,
a living organism.
Yeah, very, very good observation. And the whole notion and the whole concept of investing is so powerful here because in any organization, anything that you do, if you don't continue to place resources into it, upgrade it, it's going to eventually become obsolete. It's going to die. And it's the same with a relationship, Doc. If you don't place resources in your relationship, if you don't, the word we use is invest. If you don't invest time and energy, effort and money in your relationship, it will tend towards decline. And, that cannot be overstated.
Yeah, every now and then you come across a couple and somebody may say, oh, we used to have a good time. Things used to be so good. And we used to bond, we used to talk, we used to do this. And all of a sudden, nothing.
Nothing's happening, yeah.
I don't think that happens overnight.
Right.
You're not perfectly okay in your marriage relationship. And then, boom, it just falls apart.
No.
That is the exception rather than the rule. Things tend to, sometimes maybe people ignore the signs.
Yes.
There are times when there are things that are screaming at us and we just don't listen.
Right. And that's, we have to be attuned to that reality and not just ignore some of the things that are taking place. Now, we've been mentioning over and over again that there are certain elements in the context of a marriage. As you mentioned, they sort of scream at you, but we tend to downgrade them, maybe, so to speak. Somebody who has been probably desirous of getting your attention, and you're thinking, well, I need to do this at work, I need to do that at work, I need to do this for the children, and your spouse has been asking you for a minute, I need to talk to you. Oh yes, sweetheart. And you feel because you're married, your spouse will understand, and she's not going to leave. Everything will be okay. And so you pay so much attention to all of the other things, and one day you come home and
your spouse is not there.
She's not there, or he's not there. Yeah, and so you missed the very vital moments when that person was screaming for your attention, so to speak.
I think last week we said it a little differently. Last week we said that marriages do not develop. Well, let me use the term. A cancer does not get to stage 4
overnight.
Right.
Right.
And a marriage does not become irreparable overnight.
Right.
You know, so we want today to talk about some indicators that things may not be going so well. You know, the point I was trying to remember from last week is that marriages tend to take a long time before apparent difficulties come to the surface. And so we have to be mindful.
Yep.
So there are a few things that people tend to overlook, Dr. Braithwaite. Sometimes if they would pay attention to the signs, you know, they would maybe get a sense that things aren't going so well. And the first one is that there's increasing withdrawal of need. You know, if that is happening, that kind of says that, hey, we need to open our eyes and give attention here.
Right.
Because this may be an indication that we're taking one another for granted, we're taking this marriage for granted, things aren't going so well.
But what does that mean, though? Increasing withdrawal of need. You know, when I think about it, when you consider a young couple that just kind of got married or were dating, there's this, it's almost palpable, it's almost observable. They rely on each other so much. You know, there is this interaction that is very interesting, intriguing to observe. It's quite exciting, actually. When you look at it, you see these two young people, and they, you know, maybe they're out at a particular activity, function, and they are. One person is doing something, and the other person is waiting patiently, you know, in the vehicle, no problem, you know, going across to see how things are going, and then they will leave together. And you see that need, that kind of interactive need. But when we speak about that withdrawal of need, in years to come, years later, when things may not be so good, Doc, that person will catch a ride home. Say, okay, sweetheart, see you later. I'm going to catch a ride with Kathy, and they're gone.
Or you're not there in the first place.
Yeah.
Because you tend to live parallel lives.
Right.
You know, so the marriage itself, as you say, when things are going well, you know, we are looking out for each other's interests, and your needs become my needs.
Yes.
So that I am maybe not given the presentation tonight, but I want to know, is there anything I can assist with?
Right.
Have you done your slides?
Right.
Do you want me to review them? And your success is my success. But when we notice that you're doing your presentation and your spouse is not even saying, how did things go?
Right.
You know, there's no care, there's no interest.
There's no interest. So you're just not tuned in to the need
That's right.
of your spouse. And that's so critical. And it covers so many different areas. You spoke about getting home from work. How was your day, hon? You know, did you eat well today? You know, were you able to complete the assignment that you spoke about last evening that I saw you working on? You know, those maybe you may call them intangibles because it's not something that you pass on, but it's just an interest that you're showing in relation to the other person. And if that's not present, then it does suggest that there's a bit of a problem. So you know, focusing on need, really critical, I think.
And I want to underline here need, because we do have needs. You know, we have emotional needs.
Yes.
There are things that in the marriage you ought to know what satisfies your spouse, what your spouse likes, what your spouse desires.
Yes.
And when you get to the point where you don't really care about fulfilling those needs, you're withdrawing as opposed to supplying, then that is a telltale sign that something isn't right.
Wow.
So, you know, you may come, you know, reflect. Every now and then it's a good idea to reflect on your marriage. Hey, I've been married for X years now. How are things going with me? Am I happy in this relationship? Do I worry about whether my wife is happy or not? You know, those kinds of things. And when you recognize that there's withdrawal, it is an indication that things, and at that particular point, your spouse may not even be complaining.
Right.
You know, and which is why we're saying it's important to pay attention, because these are little signs that can say something isn't the way it ought to be.
Well, I think that moves us nicely to the next point, where we speak about unresolved differences. The couple simply walks away from unresolved differences in resignation, sort of saying, okay, there's no use trying to even address this matter. I'll just ignore it and keep moving, regardless of how intense the matter might be. And there's a certain resignation about that.
But I was just going to pick up on the word resignation. You know, when a person gets to the point of resigning, they're saying, I lay down.
Right.
You know, I'm not going to knock up with that again.
I'm not, yeah.
If in your marriage you accept the fact that there's nothing good in this anymore, why try? That's loaded, that's big, that's huge.
Very big, yeah.
You know, so you don't want to get to that point. And I'm thinking that, you know, you can say to yourself, you know, I'm not happy with something my wife is doing or my husband is doing. But, you know, I've spoken about this for so long. Let me use the example, Doc, that you shared earlier on, where your spouse has been asking you for a minute for the longest while.
Right.
But you have this to do at work, you have that to do on the football field or in the community, and you keep saying, I'm going to get to it, I'm going to get to it. And then your spouse gets to the point where they say, listen, you know what? I'm going to find a way to do this myself.
Right.
I'm resigning. I'm not going to ask him or her anymore.
Right.
That's resignation.
Right.
You know, that when these things begin to happen, or if you, as the partner, recognizes that you have gotten to the place where you're saying, you know, I can't depend on him or I can't depend on her, I'm going to do it myself. It's an indication that a marriage is not in a good place. It may not be overboard yet, but it's not in a good place.
In a good place, yeah.
So I should humble myself and go to my spouse and say, listen, there's something I've observed that I think we really need to discuss, because this is indicating that, you know, it's like you take your pressure and you realize my pressure is elevated. Hey, I better pay attention to this.
Pay attention to it, yeah. Interestingly, Doc, as you speak to this matter, you know, persons may sense something is not quite right, but they don't have the courage to address it, sort of to go to the spouse and say, you know, hon, you know, over the last few weeks, months, whatever, I just noticed, you know, that something isn't gelling with us quite well. How important is it to be able to actually, you know, make that acknowledgement and then to pursue it and to address it? You know, because a lot of persons may have the sense, but somehow they don't feel confident enough to sort of speak to the matter.
Well, I would say if you're not comfortable talking to your spouse, there's an issue. There's an issue for the marriage. And please pay attention to this. If it is a behavior, now specifically you had said earlier, unresolved differences, where you move towards resignation, right? So if there's an issue and you want to talk about it, you want to say, hey, I really am not comfortable with this, but how is my spouse going to react if I broach this subject? Then that to me indicates that your marriage is not in a good place. Now, it is better for you to pray about the matter and say, listen, this is something I have to adjust. If you keep delaying, it will get worse. So my suggestion, Doc, is that you get your spouse to the place where we can agree that we're going to sit down and have a little session together.
Conversation, yeah.
You know, we need to have a conversation.
Yeah.
Honey, you remember those times when we used to sit on the step at night and look up at the moonlight and
Talk.
reflect and so on? Can we have one of those coming up soon?
Right.
There's supposed to be a lunar eclipse coming up soon, so maybe, you know, we can
get outside and have a chat.
Yeah, and have a chat, but bring it up because it's important.
Yeah, well, one of the things that I've come across in my experience in terms of counseling with people is that they will say, you know, I will highlight to my spouse, you know, not feeling quite as though things are correct. And the person will say, yeah, really? I feel like everything is fine. You know, no problem with me. I don't know what you're struggling with, but I'm good. That can be very deflating for the one who may be feeling the need or the concern. What advice would you share if that's the response of your spouse when you go to them about a concern that you have?
Now, I would say two things, Doc. One is, if your spouse is not happy, you ought not to take it for granted.
Right.
So if you think everything is fine and your spouse is saying, no, everything is not fine, I'll just simply suggest, give attention.
Right.
Listen to your spouse.
Yep.
Listen to what they have to say, right? And a lot of times when people utter things like this, deep down inside, they know that everything isn't fine.
That's right.
You know.
Very true.
Now the second thing I want to say on that is just an illustration. If my big toe is sick, I feel it's really painful. My big toe signals to my brain that something is wrong. It's either broken, fractured, or something. And the rest of my body says, really? I'm good. Let's move on. Then we have a challenge.
Right.
And for your spouse to say, listen, we need to talk, things aren't going well, and you to respond by saying, I don't have a problem, everything is fine. That's kind of like having a sick member of your body and ignoring it because the rest of your body is okay.
Yeah, I particularly like the point you made when you indicated that if your spouse is not feeling well, then it should really impact you in a certain way, because if your spouse isn't feeling good, then you really can't feel that good. And just the time to acknowledge and to listen to what your spouse is saying is so critical and so important in terms of the overall happiness of the relationship. Because if you're in a relationship where your spouse just does not look very pleased, very happy, very comfortable, then how could you be comfortable, in that environment? I think it would be quite unfortunate. And so I think the advice you gave, just take a moment, listen, open your ears, your understanding, your mind to take in a moment to sit in, to listen to what your spouse has to say about what is making him or her uncomfortable, and then work towards addressing, whatever the issue is. I think that's so critical, so crucial.
I want to say something else, Doc, because I want to speak to those who are not there yet, those who are having a good time in their relationship. It becomes difficult to discuss an issue if you have not oriented yourselves to discussing matters, challenging things. So I like to tell couples, you ought to have a regular schedule to talk about issues. Get to the point where it is okay to discuss something, to disagree on a subject, to share a different opinion than your spouse. Your spouse says, I like this. Get to the point where you can say,
you said it's okay, though?
I don't like that.
It's okay. The people can marriage, you can actually disagree in your marriage?
Yes, of course. If you agree with every single thing your spouse does, something is wrong. I think something is wrong. So it's important to be able to talk about differences. People are afraid and get uncomfortable. We go back to Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden, where after Eve ate that fruit and gave to her husband, and their eyes were open, it was the differences that created the challenge. We don't like differences. We don't like to be on opposite sides of the pole. That makes us uncomfortable. And I'm saying we ought to get to the point where we can admit our differences and make them points of strength and healing, as opposed to something that is going to push us further apart.
Differences, when you consider them carefully, can actually be quite beautiful in terms of the overall relationship, because it creates the dynamic of innovation, because you're different to me, I have to find a new way to, or work on a way to, enhance or to make you happy. It's not something that it may necessarily come naturally to me. So I have to put in some additional effort, and the outcome can be beautiful. And it's also trial and error. I remember talking to a couple recently where one person says, they're not so big on birthdays and all the rest of it. And the spouse was saying on one occasion, got children already and went into mommy in the morning with this and that, and surprise, happy birthday. And mommy just got up and said, oh, thank you. And he was saying they were so blown away. But what that did for them was, okay, that's not mommy's thing, so we have to work on something else. You understand? That would excite mommy, because mommy's temperament is of such. And that's the kind of difference I'm talking about. Some people would think, well, she didn't appreciate it. It's not that she didn't appreciate it. It's just that she had a different, her outlook on life, and the way that she sees things is different. And all I'm saying is that, that those differences sometimes create beauty. They create innovation. They create opportunities for new and exciting things. And we have to see the cup as half full rather than half empty.
Yeah, if we go to a concert and on the way home, and I say to my spouse, my favorite tonight was so-and-so. And my spouse said, oh, that was the worst.
Right.
That was the worst for me.
Yeah.
Okay, what do I say No, it's the
It's
best.
the best.
No,
And you don't like me because you think mine was what I like was bad. You know, that's problematic. That's how some people view differences as if it's about you. It's
Yeah.
not about you. It's about the person. They have their own personality, their own views, their own likes, their own dislikes, and we have to be able to appreciate those differences, those likes, those dislikes, that will allow the relationship to thrive and allow the person not to feel boxed in and to feel as though they have to like what you like.
Yeah. Which is manipulative, controlling, and you can see why that is eventually going to create some challenges in the relationship. We have to allow people to be themselves.
That's right.
You know, to express their opinions. And let's remember this, brethren. If you're married, it doesn't say that your thoughts and your spouse's thoughts are always going to align. And it's okay for them to be different. You know, my spouse thinks that, oh, you know, today I'm planning to go outside in my garden and do something. And the other person is saying, well, today I'm praying that it rains. So that's okay, difference of opinion.
Yes,
you
right.
don't have to, you know,
Right.
argue over that.
No, it's fine. It's fine.
Yeah.
It's actually growth to be mature enough to appreciate your spouse's difference, her opinion, his opinion, and to be able to express that, speak about it without fear of reprisal. Like, you know, if I say I'm gonna be placed in the naughty corner for the next 3 days, you know what I mean? Because I express something that you may not like, and so you're gonna react in a way that you're not talking to me, and so on and so forth. And again, you know, this is such intriguing discussion because there's so many persons who struggle along those lines where, again, we make the point, everything is taken so personally. I don't like that color. And you take it as though you ask your spouse, do you like this shirt? You know, you went into the store to pick up a new shirt, and you ask your spouse, it's a green. Ah, boy, you like it? She's like, yuck, that's terrible. And you see that as an attack on you personally, because you like it and she doesn't. It's not a personal attack; it's her preference.
That's right.
She doesn't like that color.
Yeah. There's another pointer, or should we say sign, that I want to bring up now. I don't know if we can do this in about 5 minutes or so, Doc,
Yeah, I'm sure
but
we can.
I think it's so very important, right? Preferences for others for needs that the marriage used to meet. So we began this discussion earlier by talking about withdrawal from needs, you know.
Yes.
Now we're talking about preferring others who are fulfilling the needs that your marriage is supposed to be giving you.
Right, right.
So I am not enjoying my spouse's presence so much anymore. I'm enjoying the presence of this other person,
Right.
because I'm getting the need that I used to get from
In my
my
marriage, now met here.
you know.
Yeah.
And that is, if that is happening, I mean, you may still be sleeping in the same bed, still be driving in the same car to church and work, and still have little conversations here and there. But when you get to the point where you realize, I actually prefer to be over here rather than here, that is a big red flag.
Yeah, it is. It
Yeah.
is significant. You know, just in terms of a basic one would be maybe just conversation. You know, the ability to unwind when you come from work and talk with your spouse about that. And you no longer do that with your spouse. You come home, you get on the phone, you're talking to somebody else.
Yeah.
And again, you know, sometimes people, Doc, they go ahead.
I want you to say that again. Because, you know, in this era of technology,
I was just coming to that.
social
Yeah.
media,
Yeah.
it's worth saying again.
Yeah.
We get so many complaints all the time.
The point I was going to make is that persons, I've heard you know, individuals complain about how often the spouse is on the phone and whatever, and the spouse doesn't take kindly to it because they think it's an intrusion of their personal privacy. But there's an element that we're speaking about here where it's not just about the intrusion of personal privacy, it's the concern that has been raised because one spouse is recognizing that the things that you used to do, you're not doing those things anymore. You're not having those conversations anymore. You're not talking about work anymore or other matters related to the home that generally you'd have reached out to maybe ask, hi, hon, what do you think about this? I noticed this is peeling off. Can we get it fixed? Instead of speaking to your spouse now, you call somebody else You know, and that now becomes the norm. And what we're saying is it is a significant distraction for your relationship.
I think every now and then, a couple needs to stop and think about what technology is doing in their lives. I remember the days when if you wanted to make a phone call, you had to walk across the road, find a public phone booth. You know, you put in a quarter and you dial.
Make a call. And that in itself was a deterrent, right?
Exactly, right? And then we got to the place where we had the cell phone, not cell phones, the phones
in the house.
In the house, so it became a little more convenient. And then we moved now from having them in our house to having them wherever. And the matter is, it's not so much these days talking, but it is surfing, you know, and the social media effect.
Yeah.
And so you're having all of this distraction that is creating the challenge, because now your spouse is screaming. Or we used to come home and we used to sit down and unwind and talk about the day, and all of a sudden that isn't happening anymore. And I'm trying to get your attention and you're saying, well, can't I?
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
it's amazing. I think that we probably have to come back to this one, because
we need to.
There are so many things about this that can impact, and I'm going to use another quick example quickly before time runs out. But you know, previously maybe you're working on some project, an assignment, and you and your spouse would sit and work together because you have to be researching information together and so forth and so on. Now you get to the place where you just go online. You know, it's Google, it's whatever. You call a friend, and so the interactive time that you used to have isn't there any longer. So maybe we need to talk about ways that we can re-engage, because we are where we are and things have changed so much. How do we re-engage? And we could use some of the examples as well. So I just think
that's right. Well, our time has expired, so we kind of have to stop here. But it's an important conversation, and we probably need to pick up from here next week. In the meantime, if you have questions, comments, or concerns, please feel free to write to us. Drop us a line. We enjoy hearing from you. It's marriageencounter@slcadventist.org. That is marriageencounter@slcadventist.org. And do us a favor, spread the word. Tell somebody that they can hear Marriage Encounter on Second Advent at 10:30 on Thursday mornings, 6:30 on Thursday afternoons, and 2 p.m. on Saturdays. May God bless you. Until next time.